Welcome to Between the Lines. I'm Urszula Gacek, and my guest today is Dame Melinda Simmons, His Majesty's Ambassador of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to Poland. Quite a mouthful, but that's your official title, Madam Ambassador. Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for joining me today, but also for hosting us here in your beautiful residence in Warsaw.
Thank you. Yes, I think actually you're joining me, but it's lovely to have you here.
Ambassador, Britain and Poland have been amongst the staunchest supporters of Ukraine, unwavering in that support. Has that impacted on bilateral British-Polish military cooperation as well?
Well, I think that was growing naturally before, actually, as active NATO members, but what it did do was it focused minds on the nature of Russian goals, not just in Ukraine, but in the region. And for the UK, Europe's security is important for UK security. UK participation is important for Europe's security together. So actually, and I was serving in Ukraine when this happened for the whole of those 4 years, so I saw that growing. But of course, at the same time, Poland was the main facilitator, 99% of it, of the assistance, humanitarian and then military, that was going into Ukraine. That partnership was incredibly important, became more important for that assistance during that time.
But there's been a situation where you are now aiming to formalise things more with Poland bilaterally outside the NATO format.
Well, the Defence and Security Treaty, which we have been negotiating, which will be signed this year, is a way of expressing the way in which the threat has shifted. So what it does is it articulates in a much more up-to-date way the nature of the hybrid threat, which is not a word I'm a fan of because it conceals an awful lot of activity.
So there's a much wider concept of security, just than tanks on the ground and feet on the ground.
Exactly, and it recognises Poland's lived reality, because Poland is one of the countries in the neighbourhood, if you like, that is one of the most attacked in terms of hybrid, so in terms of sabotage attempts and critical national infrastructure targeting, etc. The drone incursion that we saw, for example. And all these have been important for Poland and the UK, who are close partners now, not just in military cooperation, but in defence industrial manufacturing, to articulate that. So we're clear about the nature of the threat today and the threat in the future.
I think the United Kingdom has always actually been clear, despite the distance you have. We are, of course, right on the border of this conflict. Yes. But the United Kingdom, I think, has always had a deep understanding and, dare I say, mistrust of Putin's politics, which sometimes we didn't find with the other European partners, regardless of who was in government. Yes. What does that mean in terms of actually military presence here? Do we actually have British troops stationed here in Poland at the moment?
So this is going to be strange for me to argue your first point, but I think actually one of all of our most important lessons is to understand that I think we were all, the UK included, slow in understanding Russian intentions in recent times. If you think back to the invasion of the Donbass and the annexing of Crimea, and think about how the Minsk peace agreement was formulated, and you see that the UK was not a guarantor of that peace agreement. As it turns out, probably actually quite a prescient move. But at the time, this was about not fully appreciating that this was the beginning of this road to a widespread invasion. So I would rather say not that we've always distrusted him, but that we were probably one of the quickest learners, that outside Minsk we were watching this develop, and we were the first country to recognise what was coming and then act on what was coming, those NLAWs that were flying from the UK over to Ukraine. So that I think you can credit us with, but we have had to have that same journey. I think what's enabled us to be active with Poland is that throughout that time we have been active contributors through NATO. So the troop presence inside Poland and the kit and the way in which we have been using that kit inside Poland has been part of NATO operations. We are part of
So this isn't something new. This isn't something that's been increased. The presence has increased since the war?
Yes, it's increased, but as part of NATO presence. So NATO presence has been increasing, and the UK has been playing its part as part of that. The one thing I would say, though, is additional, is that it was the UK that provided air defence for Rzeszów during that time in which the bulk of that assistance was being sent over to Ukraine. That ended for us at the end of 2024, but we were providing that. We also react quite quickly, so when Belarus unrest unfolded, and that border became less secure for Poland, we helped guard that border.
Haven't British military personnel or your assistants been also present on the border here?
Yes, they have. And so at the moment we have 350 troops who are part of that East Shield defence of NATO's eastern flank. And we've also been manning those Typhoon jets that have been in the news as a result of scrambling for air defence. And I see that developing over coming years because we see the threat developing over coming years.
But you mentioned the treaty, that this is now, I understand it's in negotiation, it's also probably it's going to be ratified by both parliaments ultimately.
Yes, it will need to be, yes.
That is outside NATO. This is a bilateral agreement. Is this common for the United Kingdom to enter into these kind of bilateral agreements on military issues?
Well, I mean, for one thing, how you understand security, military is a really important element, but actually it doesn't just cover military. That treaty also looks at energy security, for example.
So it goes beyond what NATO would give in its...
For one thing, and for another, I think the point about hybrid attack is exactly that you understand it as being military attack and non-military attack. So this is about how Russia, in this case, comes after civilian capability, right, to weaken civilian trust in government and to attack resilience. And so the treaty actually goes much broader and looks at all the ways in which security is threatened and looks at all the ways in which milestone projects that we work on together can help increase that resilience in Poland and in the region. So that's one of the reasons why we think...
So how common are these treaties at this level bilaterally? Do you know? I mean,
well, this defence and security treaty is particularly focused on that because Poland has some really important priorities that relate to defence and security that are equally in the UK national interest because this is a common understanding of what the threat is to the continent. We're part of that continent. We have been developing bilateral treaties in several different themes since leaving the EU, of course. And now, of course, we are looking at aligning more closely with many EU policies because of the speed of the threat. But I see all those bilateral treaties, and of course Poland is also negotiating a range of bilateral treaties. It's signed one with France, etc. It is getting close to Baltic countries. I see this increasingly as something that complements the multilateral system so that you've got agility and you've got the ability to manoeuvre within NATO but alongside bilateral commitments.
It also sometimes gives you a group of like-minded member states that you can create a majority where you need a majority, but sometimes you need consensus.
Yes.
So, Ambassador, you mentioned one aspect also of this policy is investment, British investment in the defence sector. Now Poland is set to receive enormous funding in the form of loans from the European Union, but this spending needs to be actually within the European Union. Are British investors worried about that, or do they see that it is also an opportunity for them?
Well, the SAFE mechanism is, I think, a fantastic mechanism. It's in response to Europe rearming Europe using European capability. But supply chains being so much more integrated, SAFE alone can't deliver, right, for the countries with which European Union countries work together that are either in Europe but not in the EU, or they're not in the European continent at all. And so different ways of managing that have evolved. But for the UK defence industrial sector, this has not been an issue. It's perfectly possible to continue to work either with separate funds or complementary funds or up to capped limit funds for us to continue with the campaign that we have and which we're working together with, which is worth about £8 billion, so it's pretty significant, and job creating both in Poland and in the UK. This continues.
So you just mentioned investments, substantial, job creation.
Yes.
There's more to Poland than investing in defence. Where are the most interesting areas where British investment is now focusing on Poland?
Well, the industrial strategy that the UK produced last year has presently worked out very well for the bilateral relationship because there is so much natural overlap. So where you see investment and joint innovation on both sides is in the fields of professional services and business services. So, for example, the Warsaw Tower in the centre of town was designed by British architects, then built, of course, by Polish capability. And I think, by the way, not to go entirely off topic, but one of the interesting things about the partnership is Poland looks to UK for the experience, skill and innovation. The UK then looks to Poland for being able to manufacture, using its industrial capacity and be able to deliver at scale. And so in all sectors, you're beginning to see that pattern of partnership. But anyway, professional services, advanced manufacturing, clean energy is beginning to be an area of investment. Small modular reactors, for example, as Poland looks to its energy security, and companies like Rolls-Royce are showing interest in this sector. Defence manufacturing, I should say, extends broadly, right? So there's weapons and there's frigates and there's air defence. There is also drone innovation, for example, which is one of the fastest growing sectors. So, and then we've got a quite interesting developing scenario in food and drink. It's really interesting how much whiskey
British companies
Poland
investing
buys.
here.
Yes, exactly.
Has Brexit prompted them to invest here so that so they can basically supply what is a very large market, actually?
It is what I was going to say. Actually, for whiskey, it's a larger market than China, which is really interesting.
Yes, but I wouldn't recommend producing whiskey. I'd rather have it from Scotland, actually, or Ireland.
No, I mean in terms of exports. So
yes,
we export more from Scotland to Poland than we do to China, which is a pretty huge market.
More than to China?
Yes, we do. In the millions. It's something like 30 million bottles to China, and I think it reached nearly 50 million to Poland. So Poland knows their whiskey, which is a good thing. But also we ran a food and drink event at Carrefour supermarket, which was a huge success, and I think probably builds less on Brexit as an event and more on the fact that a significant Polish expat community and Poland within the EU having access to basically broader tastes and experiences has both a nostalgic interest and also just a kind of curiosity for different kinds of foods that mean that iconic British products are finding their way onto supermarket shelves. So that's quite an exciting new area.
That's true. I mean, there was a moment when the United Kingdom opened its market very early to, in fact, it was the first, I think,
that's right.
to open in 2004, and there were upwards of 1 million Poles descended on your shores. Now, in the post-Brexit period, it's estimated that many have left, some have come back to here. And so, of course, they will be seeking the products that they have been used to using during their stay in the United Kingdom.
Yes, exactly.
So food, defence, what about education? This has always been, I mean, learning the English language, which of course, apologies to our French speaking colleagues, but it is the lingua franca, also even in diplomacy now.
No need to apologise.
So please tell me, how has cooperation, and especially making places for Polish students who are also very visible at British universities, who have a more difficult job now to actually find themselves there. Do you see this as something we can remedy?
Well, I think we're on that road. So first of all, the British Council is a popular source of English language training here in Poland. So they have bases in Wrocław and in Kraków, as well as in Warsaw. I actually recently visited the one in Kraków and was amazed really at the kind of hubbub, the energy, although it was exam week, so there were an awful lot of people there looking terribly nervous. But it was really interesting that it remains a partner of choice for English language learning. It has great brand and great awareness. As for universities, so you may know that we are negotiating to participate in the Youth Mobility Scheme. We are returning to Erasmus. So where we may have seen a dip in numbers.
So there is a chance that the UK would come back to Erasmus?
There is a chance. We are negotiating that at the moment, along with a number of sectors that respond to Prime Minister Starmer's speech in Munich about closer alignment to the EU. So assuming that that's negotiated successfully in coming times, we should be able to see more mobility both ways for tertiary education.
You mentioned, I mentioned returning Poles coming back to Poland, but do you also see an increased interest of actual Brits coming and living and working here in Poland, despite the challenges now that they face because of Brexit? It's not so easy for them to settle. They have to apply for settled status and whatever. Do you see a greater interest in that? So
this is an interesting one, and I've only been in the country for 6 months. I've travelled widely in that time, and what I have seen in my travels is a huge surge of interest in tourism. So there are a lot of Brits who come through regions in Poland, not just to Warsaw, but also through Gdansk and through Krakow, etc., through Wrocław. All of these places are getting much more airtime when people think about alternative tourist destinations. They're proving immensely popular, and that's fantastic to see. And I am also seeing people coming to work on contracts, so they're coming to work on consultancy, etc. That corresponds, I think, to this increase in the financial services and professional services sectors. So you see more of that happening. What I have not seen, either in the data or anecdotally as I've travelled, is UK citizens coming here to settle. So on the official statistics, which I've had discussions, as you might imagine, with authorities about, that is showing a very low, if you like, increase. It's sort of in the kind of scores.
Possibly that's because of the bureaucratic hurdles they also face here in Poland.
It's possibly the case. Forgive me, I didn't mean to interrupt you before, but there is also a case that you do need the language if you're going to work here. English is a popular language, but I've discovered myself, and I did tread the hard road of learning Polish, which is not an easy language to learn, doesn't have grammatical overlap with English, but you need it if you're going to live and work, frankly, anywhere in the country. So I haven't seen any kind of sharp uptick. I have seen a sort of a registered kind of quite low increase over the last sort of 2-3 years, but it's not particularly significant.
I mean, this contrasts remarkably with 10, 20 years ago, when it was actually sufficient to be able to speak English to secure yourself a very decent job here in Poland, because there was such a deficit of decent English speakers. But now you actually need another skill set.
Yes.
So you mentioned the British Council, but these kind of soft power institutions everywhere in the world are coming under increasing pressure in funding, even as budgets now steer more towards defence. And of course, it's difficult to sell sometimes to your domestic voters that you're funding soft power initiatives abroad. Over the years, how has the British Council's presence here changed? Has it suffered because of funding cuts in the United Kingdom, or is it still very much vibrant and present here?
In Poland, it's very much present. It's still very popular. And of course, during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's also hosted Ukraine's British Council capability for quite a long time. That's now returned. But I think that it's had to go through a revolution of that we all recognise, two, really. One as a result of COVID, where learning went online. And so British Council, along with many other soft power entities, have had to look, first of all, at sort of being forced to do it and then looking at the opportunities presented by it. So it is true that British Council in Poland teaches a mix. It has in-person classes, it has online classes, and I think that's a good and a positive way forward. The next challenge, which frankly we're all grappling with, is artificial intelligence. And as much the threats that we all imagine it faces in terms of authentic learning and potentially jobs, but also the opportunities for how you can use that to multiply. And I think the British Council is only just at the beginning of that journey. But in answer to your question about British Council's presence in Poland, I don't see that reducing anytime soon. The demand is still there.
So it's demand-driven.
Yes, well, as it should be. The exams in the English language are a commercial product at the end of the day.
Exactly. So what prompted the BBC to restart a Polish language service after so many years of absence? Why did they invest in a Polish language service?
Well, firstly, that precedes my time here. And secondly, of course, BBC makes their own decisions about their markets. So I can't give you a clear answer to that. I can tell you, I think it's a brilliant development. I think in particular, recognising that you have broader reach if you make your products available in Polish language, harks back to what we were saying earlier about British citizens who may want to work here and live here, that the importance of the national language is something that they're sensitive to, and I think that's a fantastic development. I haven't yet seen their viewing figures for that page, but I know that when they first launched, the popularity was there. So it's a great, as far as I can see, it's a great development. I used it for my own exam preparation.
For the older generation in Poland, there is an incredible nostalgia, because people in the dark days of communism used to listen to, basically, there was Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, and the Polish language service of the BBC, which were very, very trusted.
Yes.
But now, for the BBC, also they've been impacted by funding cuts.
Yes.
And one of the things they have cut back on is what was a fantastic and easy access for people all over the world to access their radio services. And that now, the app that BBC Sounds is now very much restricted. Do you regret that that content is not so widely available? I think it was very popular, not only amongst expatriates.
Well, I would say, first of all, the BBC is facing the same challenges and the need to rethink the business model as any other sector, as British Council that I referenced before. And I don't know what will have driven, again, it's for them, it's their decision to decide how they promote their services. Of course, BBC Radio is still available here. World Service Radio is available. Radio 4, brilliantly, if you're an addict, which many people are, is available. So it's not that those radio services have been taken away, but more, I imagine, that they have decided they need to diversify and they need to put funds in different places. But the decision-making for it, I'm afraid I'm not party to.
Ambassador, you came, so now maybe a more personal question. Your previous posting was Ukraine. You were there in the midst of the beginning of the full-scale invasion. I think you were one of the few ambassadors who pretty much stayed put for most of the time as well. Did you leave Kiev for a while?
Yes, I did. I evacuated to Lviv just 3 days before the invasion. So I was one of the last ambassadors to leave Kiev. Didn't want to leave, but told myself that if instructed to leave, in the end, you work for a ministry that has duty of care for you, that if I was told to leave, I would leave, and I was told to do that, and so I moved back to Lviv, stayed in Lviv.
But you were still in Ukraine, because some actually left the country for a while.
Yes, that's right. Then for a very short period, so in our case it was only about 3 weeks in the end, we pulled back to Poland. I based myself out of the embassy in Warsaw and frankly spent the entire time getting back in. So it really was very short-lived, and as soon as we received permission to go back in, we were straight back into Warsaw. So although it's true that I was outside the country, it was for a very short time. And actually, it proved really helpful, because in the time I was in Poland, I was able to visit Rzeszów. I was able, where of course this was the hub, transport hub. It was really helpful for me to understand that and see it. I was able to see how Poland was taking in such an enormous number of Ukrainian refugees and the extraordinary national response to it, which I still believe exists in people's hearts, as we've seen in the energy outage response. That was a perspective that if I'd stayed in Ukraine, I would not have understood so clearly. So I was able to take that back with me and did quite a lot of close work with the Polish ambassador in the months afterwards.
So you actually had already first-hand experience of being here in Poland before you were posted here. Do you get a say? Does the Foreign and Commonwealth Office say, Ambassador, where would you like to be posted?
Wouldn't that be nice? No.
No.
It's an open competition, and so I went through the competitive process. But I'd like to think that experience of being in the region and my time in Poland and my collaboration with Polish partners was probably part of my pitch.
So why you decided. So what next, Ambassador? You said you visited Rzeszów. How much of Poland have you managed to see in the 6 months or so that you've been here?
A lot, actually. So I've been to the Tri-City, partly because the UK partners with Poland on Narew and the building of those frigates at Gdynia port, the transformation of which has just been so fantastic. So it was incredibly proud to go and see it, but also, of course, the development of Sopot and to go to Gdansk. I've been to Krakow. In fact, I studied my Polish in Krakow, so I got to know that city very well. I've been there now 3 or 4 times for different occasions, and also to meet British businesses who are creating hubs in different parts of Poland now. That's another new trend, and so there are hubs for British businesses in Krakow. I've been to Rzeszów, of course. I've been to Łódź, which is where my father's family is from.
And you can pronounce it perfectly, which is a rarity.
Yeah, I'm afraid my father still calls it Lodz. I have a little bit of a learning curve
so,
for
Ambassador,
him.
in your brief, really, 6 months here, you've done an amazing amount of work already.
And
you came well prepared for this post. I wish you every success in the next 3 or 4 years that you will hopefully spend with us here in Warsaw. And thank you for joining TVP World today and for giving us a very frank and open discussion on the state of British-Polish relations. Thank you, Ambassador.
Very much.